Michael joins us now from Kville. Michael, you've also, as a Renaissance man, got the new hair color. You did that because you lost a bet, but by anybody's account, you did not lose the bet technically because you look terrific.
Well, I thank you. I did lose a bet, and I frankly don't like it, but my wife does, and that's really the most important thing. So everybody here at the radio station is like a coin flip. Tails I win, tails, heads you lose. So if that's the case, maybe I'll stay with it. I don't know.
All right, so we're going to try and talk baseball now and not get just totally paralyzed by your boyish good looks right now. Let's talk about sluggers still out there on the market. Looks like Jose Bautista and the Blue Jays are coming to terms, maybe on a 1 year with an option. But are you surprised that some of these big-name hitters are still available?
I'm amazed. I really am, because this game has turned into a home run hitting game. And when you see guys out there like Jose Bautista who can still play, and Mark Trumbo and Mike Napoli, guys who had 47 home runs and 34 home runs respectively, and they're still looking for a job. Now, they'll get a job. I don't think that the market really went the way they thought. If you remember, Bautista said during the season that he didn't want to take anything less than $150 million for 5 years. And I'll tell you, I think the Blue Jays are getting a great deal. You're getting a guy who's older, who has a lot to prove. And if you get him at $17 to $18 million a year, that's a great signing. I think other teams would have taken a chance once the market fell apart. But unfortunately, he has that draft pick compensation attached to him, and nobody wanted to take that chance. Now, if I was Bautista, I might have waited until June after the draft where there wouldn't have been a draft pick, but that would have been a big gamble as well. The other two guys, you're going to get them at a bargain as well. And I think the Mets are the ones that are being held hostage by this, because they can't trade Jay Bruce until those other guys get traded.
You talk about Bautista, Michael, and the $150 million. I do want to see the press conference when he eventually does sign, because even if he gets 2 years, he obviously took a lot less money. But let's shift gears back to another topic that we were just talking about earlier with Dellin Betances, salary arbitration. But let's take it away from the big market teams. You seem to think that salary arbitration isn't always kind to the small market teams.
I think it's totally unkind. I don't understand why it wasn't addressed in the collective bargaining agreement that was just signed. I would think that at least half of the owners want no part of it, because what the players are paid by big market teams, they are used as comparables in the arbitration market. So a smaller market team has to pay the money that a big market team would pay just to keep the player through 6 years. If I was the owners, I say, listen, I would give you free agency after 5 years. I don't want arbitration in years 4, 5, and 6. I think it destroys some smaller market teams. It really does. And it forces them to sign long-term guaranteed contracts to try to get out of the arbitration. I've always thought arbitration treated the smaller market teams very unfairly, because they have to play on the same playing surface as the big market teams like the Red Sox, the Yankees, and the Dodgers. And they simply can't do it.
But, Michael, really quickly, don't you believe, too, that some of those small market teams are getting revenue sharing? They need to reinvest that in their product and not just get rid of all those quality players.
Absolutely, but arbitration forces them to do it on the level of the other teams. You can reinvest that money and get 4 or 5 players at a lower price rather than have to pay your guy that you want to keep, that you've invested in, that you developed, just to keep him the same price that the Red Sox would pay him. I just think comparables really blow up in the small market teams' faces, but they didn't address it with the CBA, so they must be okay with it. And when you ask smaller market teams about it, they say, we just want to be able to keep our players for 6 years, and that's the way they can do it.
Michael, you talk about investing in a player. The Yankees have invested $175 million in Masahiro Tanaka when you count the $20 million posting fee. But there's a chance that he can opt out of his deal after the 2017 season. If you were the Yankees, how would you handle this situation?
I'd let it play out, Jack. I mean, it's the elephant in the room. Everybody knows about it. He has that partially torn UCL in his elbow. I don't think that you could say, okay, let's rip this up and take the opt-out away and we'll give you more years. If I'm the Yankees, I'm rooting for him a great season. He's their best pitcher by far, and he's one of the best pitchers in the major leagues. But remember, this 7-year deal will take him to a normal age for a pitcher. If all of a sudden he opts out after 4 years and you have to give him another 7-year deal, then you're going to have a whole CC Sabathia situation all over again. I think you keep him for the prime years, and if he has a great year, then you live with it, and you let him hit the free agent market and see what he gets. And ironically enough, if you want to keep him the full 7 years, the best way to do that is if he gets injured this year, you don't want that, or if he has a bad year, and you don't want that. So you're rooting for him to have a great year, maybe win the Cy Young, which might be his ticket out of New York, because I just don't think it would be prudent to give him another 7-year deal. It just doesn't work with pitchers, and I think that teams are finding that out.
You know, I wonder, too, Jack, if there's any chance that they follow the template of what happened with Sabathia. He did opt out, but they almost immediately signed an extension for him.
They did. It was 2 years, $50 million. But I think times have changed, as Michael just said, to invest that many years in a pitcher. And as good as Tanaka has been for the Yankees, Brian Cashman is already on the record as saying, listen, we are going to let this play out. And they are hopeful that Tanaka has a great year. He would have 3 years and about $70 million left on that contract after this year. Could he get on the open market? We don't know, but he could get more than that, especially if he has a good season. If you're the Yankees, you sit tight, you let this play out, and then you make your decisions after 2017. You
know, with the uncertainty of Tanaka, Michael, also Pineda becoming a free agent after the season, you could say, maybe go out and spend some prospects and some of those elite blue chippers and go get Jose Quintana. And Brian Cashman sat here a week ago and said that he has made calls to the White Sox. The asking price is just too high. But do you think that at some point the Yankees are going to have to shake loose with some of those prospects? Because that's exactly what they are in order to get some quality talent, either for the rotation or the roster.
I think you have to do that, and I understand why Brian's not doing it now, because he doesn't feel he's close to the finish line, sort of like what the Indians were last year. They felt that they could win a World Series. That's why they gave up the prospects they gave up. But at some point, and this is why organizations must scout themselves as well as they scout other teams, you've got to make decisions on your guys. The Yankees are overloaded in their farm system with prime shortstop prospects. Only one of them could play that position. So you make that decision within the confines of your front office, and you say, okay, I've decided on player A, I'll deal player B. And he's still a highly thought of prospect, and this way you could get a player that might fill a hole for you. But I think that the Yankees are just waiting to see how these guys develop, give themselves more time to scout their own players and get closer to the finish line where they feel that they're a finished product if they make that big deal. I believe that they look at Quintana and go, yeah, he'd be a great addition for us. Does it make us a World Series contender? Their answer is no, and that's why they're not going to part with those kids until that type of deal would take them to the next level, and I just don't think they're close to that level at this point. They're a playoff team, maybe, but a World Series team, I don't think they see it.
Michael, I'm glad you brought up the idea of waiting, because at first I thought you were going to say hit the ground running and trade some of those prospects. But I think the important thing here is patience, as you said, and also doing your own scouting, because at some point you are going to have an abundance of players and then you flip those players. But you and I both know, and Bob knows too, in those front offices, every team is hesitant to trade that one guy who maybe does turn into a superstar. So that is what Brian Cashman and the Yankee front office have to guard against, correct?
It is, and I think that's the way I would think as well. But just remember one thing. Prospects are just that. They're just that. Most of them bust. Most of them don't become stars. That's why self-evaluation is the most important thing. You see them every day. You scout them every day. You know how they are behind closed doors. You know how they work the clubhouse, what type of attitude they have. When you find that out and you have the information that other teams don't have, then you could push your so-called prospects on other teams to get better players. But they're still in the evaluating process, because a lot of the guys that they brought in to make them the top farm system in baseball, they haven't had them that long. They had them for 2 months last year. So I think they're still in the prospect or the process of evaluating them. And when they do, they've got to cut bait at some point, because all of them cannot make it to the Bronx.
Yeah, well, some of those guys that haven't tasted the majors yet, they need to bear fruit here somewhere down the line. Guys that have, Aaron Judge, Greg Bird. Michael, you could probably say the same thing, but then I also think of the guys that have been around a while. And for a guy like Jacoby Ellsbury, and Jack and I have talked about this on the show, there's a guy that can have a huge impact at the top of the lineup, but for a couple of years simply has not.
He has not. I don't think he's lived up to his advanced billing. He didn't live up to what he's done in Boston, where he was a .294 hitter with the Yankees, .264. He doesn't seem to be able to get on the field as much as you'd want him to be. The slugging percentage is not what it was in Boston. That 130 home run season seems like the aberration. I don't think this hyperbole, but I look at this guy as one of the most important people for the Yankees. He's untradeable with the contract that he has and what he's done in the first 3 years. So he is what he is, and you've got him. You need him to be a great player again. You need him to be an igniter. You need him to hit the ball into the seats at Yankee Stadium. You need him to steal more bases as well, because if they're going to take that next step and be closer to being the team and the contender for a championship they want to be, they're not moving Ellsbury. So you've got to make sure that Ellsbury could be the player that he once was. For the first 3 years as a Yankee, I don't think he's come close to that. You know the talent's there. We've seen it when he was with the Red Sox. He's got to get closer to that, or the Yankees are really hampered with that contract for the next 4 years. Again, it's unmovable, and they've got a lot of young outfielders that they could use if he wasn't there. Well, he's going to be there, so you want him to be as good as he could be.
All right, Michael, great point. We're going to let you go. Have a great night, and we'll see you again soon.